Mrs. Andrea Leadsom to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Murray, and it's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, I think for the first time today. And I'm delighted to have secured this debate marking Infant Mental Health Week. Infant Mental Health Week is an annual opportunity to highlight that actually human beings are the most underdeveloped creature on earth at birth. Our brains, and therefore our responses, our reactions and our knowledge, is completely undeveloped. In fact, many people would say we're born about 2 years premature. What other animal can't do anything for itself until it is at least a year old? Well, that's the plight of human beings. So infant mental health is therefore, without any shadow of a doubt, more important than mental health throughout the rest of your life, because it's here in that critical period when you are so small you don't know what's what or where's where. That is when your ability to have secure lifelong mental health is laid down. From conception to the age of 2, a secure and loving relationship between a baby and his or her carer literally shapes the way the baby's brain develops. It's when the building blocks for lifelong physical and emotional health are laid down. And like a sponge, the baby's developing brain will soak up the atmosphere around them and the environment that he or she is born into. In the womb, a baby whose mum is terrified of childbirth, or is being treated with violence by her partner, or who is misusing alcohol or drugs, will be profoundly physically and mentally impacted by that experience. Infant mental health, or more specifically, early intervention in the first 1,001 critical days of life from conception to the age of 2, has been a passion of mine for more than 25 years. I chaired the Oxford Parent-Infant Project in 1999 and set up NORPIT, the Northamptonshire Parent-Infant Project, providing parent-infant psychotherapy to families who are struggling to form a secure bond with their babies. I established PIP UK, a national charity that went on to establish and support a number of other parent-infant teams right around the country. I also wrote the 1001 Critical Days Manifesto that went on to become the first 1001 Days movement. Infant mental health is a subject incredibly dear to my heart. So science tells us that a secure and loving relationship with a key carer will shape the way the baby's brain develops, with long-term and positive consequences for that baby's mental health. Fundamentally, it is about self-regulation. A baby who is secure in his or her earliest relationships will later on be able to experience anger, fear, jealousy, and disappointment, and they will be able to regulate their own responses in an appropriate way. And it's the earliest relationship between parents and their babies that constructs that ability to self-regulate and hence delivers that pathway to good lifelong mental health. Research released today by the Royal Foundation demonstrates that 91% of parents and carers agree that early years are important in shaping an adult's life, but only 17% recognise how uniquely important the period from birth to 5 is. As the Duchess of Cambridge said herself, our experiences in early childhood fundamentally impact our whole life and set the foundation for how we go on to thrive as individuals, with one another, as a community and as a society. In 2015, the NCT found that 1 in 3 first-time dads were worried about their mental health following their baby's birth. And we know that according to the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, up to 1 in 5 mums sadly suffer due to the lack of focus on support for mental health in the perinatal period. Unfortunately, we don't really have granular information on perinatal depression of the parents and carers in order to properly impact assess the mental health effect on babies. But the mental health of the parent does very clearly impact on their baby's development. We know a very good example of this is that a pregnant mum who suffers from stress, for whatever reason, will produce more cortisol in her blood in her bloodstream the stress hormone, which will pass through the placenta into the unborn child. The more stressed the mother, the more frequently the fetus is exposed to higher levels of cortisol. And we know that exposure to high levels of cortisol in the womb can lead to modifications in gene expressions before the baby's even born. So even in the womb, the potential for lifelong emotional and physical health is already being determined. Once out of the womb, being left to cry unattended for continuous, lengthy periods of time, or being terrified by witnessing violence and anger within the family, or through loud and aggressive behaviour in their environment, all of those experiences will have the same impact on the baby of raising the baby's levels of cortisol. And over lengthy periods of time, there is evidence that this damages the baby's immune system, and evidence suggests will give him or her a lifelong predisposition towards higher risk-taking behaviour. Now, when a baby's born, they have no cognition at all. The baby can only cry or sleep or look around. They don't know if they're cold or hungry or bored or in pain. They only know something's wrong. So a baby cries to attract the attention of a loving adult carer. When that carer turns up and takes the time to soothe the baby, to change the baby, to feed the baby, to sing to the baby, the impact of this tender and loving response brings the baby back to a state of calm, reduces the level of stress until the baby is old enough to understand how to regulate his or her own feelings. And if not even more important is the fact that at birth, a baby's brain is only partially formed. And it's understood that a baby's brain puts on up to 1 billion neural connections every minute during the first year of life. Those neural connections are literally stimulated by the quality of attention of the principal loving carer and the experiences of the world around them, which is why, for the healthy brain development of a baby, parental attunement and loving attention are fundamental. So simply put, what you do with a baby from conception to the age of 2 is about building the human and emotional capacity of that infant. What you do after the age of 2 is almost all about trying to reverse damage that is already done. There is a wealth of evidence that demonstrates that poor mental health, substance dependency and domestic abuse amongst parents leads to significantly poorer outcomes for babies and young children. Research from the Maternal Mental Health Alliance highlights that where some of the greatest levels of socio-economic deprivation exist are also where poor maternal mental health is at its highest. When they start school, children from such disadvantage are on average 4 months behind their peers, and it gets worse from there on in. The quality of attachment that a baby has to their principal adult caregiver therefore has a profound impact on their lifelong mental health. And the ambition for our society should be for every baby to achieve a secure attachment to that caregiver, be it mum, dad, kinship carer or adoptive parent. Secure attachment is the foundation for good lifelong mental health. Its possible effects having an impact on parenting from one generation to the next. If you were well parented, then there's a high likelihood you will become a good enough parent and your baby will form a secure attachment to you. And examples of insecure attachment are found, therefore, where caregiving is inconsistent. Babies who suffer from insecure attachment aren't given the consistent, loving care that they need in order to feel that the world is a good place and that people are generally kind. Neglect of a baby has a very damaging impact. The baby with insecure attachment will, of course, have other chances in life. We never write anyone off. Babies who are insecurely attached in the very early stages will have lots of other opportunities to make good friends, to have other key adults in their life who might help to turn things around for them and to help them build their own emotional capability. But there is no doubt that insecurely attached infants will always struggle a bit more in later life to deal with life's ups and downs. It will be those babies who might struggle to keep friends and relationships and might also struggle to cope without help with parenting when their time comes. This is sometimes known as the cycle of deprivation, where general lack of good mental health is passed down from one generation to the next. But the most challenging early mental health impact, is reserved for those babies who develop a disorganised attachment with their principal caregiver. That's where the person you rely on to look after you, to soothe you, to keep you alive when you're a baby, is also the most dangerous person in your life. The person you turn to for comfort might one moment hurt you and the next moment hug you. These babies very often find that making sense of the world becomes very difficult, and many of the most damaging outcomes in society, criminality, suicide, self-harm, sociopathic behaviour, are enacted by those who suffer disorganised attachment as a baby. So it should be blindingly obvious to all that whatever we do to invest in giving every baby the best start for life will pay us back 1,000,000 times over, 1,000,000,000 times over, in terms of general well-being, healthy communities and a stronger society. Now, if we had a long way to go before COVID lockdown, then there's no doubt that this Infant Mental Health Week is vital because it shines a spotlight on the huge damage done by 2 years of pandemic lockdowns. Dads and co-partners not permitted to be with mum and the new baby, face-to-face health visits and other support like family hubs moving to virtual only, wider family and friends unable to meet the new arrival and provide support, babies not able to meet other babies, and an exacerbation of existing problems such as addictions, domestic violence and poor mental health. But above all else, the devastating isolation at a time when we all know that new parents are desperate to get out the house, go and have a chat with another parent about the sleep you didn't get last night. You know, what size nappies should we have? What are you doing about weaning? Has your baby got their first tooth yet? All of the chats and the empathy and the consolation that new parents give to each other, all missing during COVID lockdown. A report carried out by the Parent Infant Foundation, Best Beginnings and Home Start, titled Babies in Lockdown, revealed that 6 in 10 were concerned about parental mental health in lockdown, and 2/3 said that COVID had affected their ability to cope with caring for their baby. Now, we know that health visitors provide a vital support service for families who are struggling. Every family in England should be offered 5 mandated reviews from a health visitor between pregnancy and age 2.5 as a minimum. Yet even though local authorities, many of whom are still using phone and virtual appointments to count as reviews, they have reported in their latest quarterly data from May that 18.6% of babies missed out on their 9 to 12 month review, and over a quarter of toddlers missed out on their 2 to 2.5 year review. And that's including all those who got the telephone-only service. There were still many who didn't get anything at all. And again, published in May, only 85% of children in England were at or above their expected level in communication skills, compared to 89% before the pandemic. And 79% were at or above the expected level in 5 key development assessments at that review stage, compared to 83% pre-pandemic. A report by Ofsted in April 2022 found that the pandemic has continued to affect young children's communication and language development, with many providers noticing delays in speech and language. The negative impact on children's personal, social and emotional development has also continued, with many lacking confidence in group activities, and social and friendship building skills have been affected. There also continues to be an impact on children's physical development, including delays in babies learning to crawl and to walk. Lockdown has caused and exacerbated many already existing challenges. So in my opinion, the Early Years Healthy Development Review that I'm chairing could not have come at a more important time. From the summer of 2020, the review has been focused on ensuring that every baby gets the best start for life. The vision sets out 6 key action areas, and these were made government policy in March 2021. The action areas will deliver, first, a joined-up set of Start for Life services for every single family in England. Second, the rollout of family hubs as a welcoming place, providing physical, virtual and outreach services for every single family in England. Third, trusted digital, virtual and telephone support designed to meet the needs of the baby and their carers, as well as the development of the digital Red Book that will allow much greater continuity of care for every baby. Fourth, a modern mixed skills workforce that will provide much greater continuity of care and that works with the baby at the centre of everything we do to deliver wraparound empathetic support. Fifth, we need much more understanding of the impact and potential of early intervention. So we will also be improving data collection, evaluation, outcomes for the mental health and well-being of babies and their families, and be developing proportionate inspection of services. And then sixth, this will all require real leadership, both locally and nationally. And of course, fundamentally, Mrs Murray, we need to ensure that the Treasury will continue to fund the Best Start for Life for the long run. So I'm delighted that this vision is shared cross-party, because I have no doubt that spokespeople on all benches here today will want to add their support to giving every baby the best start for life. And it is a fantastically cross-party issue, and I pay tribute to the many colleagues here today, but also who couldn't be here, who lend their support over so many years for this agenda. The views and lived experiences of babies and their carers have been at the heart of the Early Years Review. From Blackpool to Stoke-on-Trent, from Worthing to Bexley-Heath, from Camden to Cornwall, parents have shared with us the good and the bad. My 1001 Critical Days podcast has highlighted the mental health journeys of parents and their babies, and an LBC phone-in really made clear the challenges faced by so many dads and co-parents, and the particular support that they need and is currently lacking in their amazing journey to parenting. Time and time again, we've heard every parent wants to know how to be a good parent, where they can access early years support, what is on offer for them, and why they might need that support. They want companionship and not to be isolated, and they want to be able to share their stories with parents in a similar situation to them. We heard from parents of babies with disabilities that they don't want to be left out and stigmatised and treated as different. We heard from many parents from different ethnic backgrounds, LGBT parents, single parents and foster parents, that they don't want to be treated any differently from other parents either. All parents of every type were asking for a seamless, joined-up approach to accessing the support they need. A priority is for face-to-face support, but in this 21st century, parents and carers also want access to services virtually when it's urgent or time-pressing, or they just have a quick question. Parents also want to avoid telling their story over and over again to different early years professionals. And there's huge support for a digital version of the Red Book, where parents can keep a permanent record of their baby's birth experience, baby's first tooth, first photo with granny, and all of the other lovely records that parents want to have, as well as communicating with the professionals who are supporting them. And so, Mrs Murray, the positive to take away from today's debate is that if we provide the support and if we really do reach out and make sure that every family knows where to go to get help and they are educated as to what good looks like, then I personally have no doubt that we can transform our society for the better. And to end, I would just like, in her Platinum Jubilee year, to use the words of the Queen. In the birth of a child, there is a new dawn with endless potential. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered Infant Mental Health Week 2022. I intend to start to call the backbench spokespeople at a few minutes before 4. So if members speaking can bear that in mind, and I call Murina Wilson.
Thank you, Mrs Murray, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire for securing this debate and also for championing this issue with such expertise and such passion for so many years. It's great to see that commitment and the support that she's managed to secure actually from government recently, and there's always much more we can do, and that's why we're here debating today what more can be done. I won't actually, Mrs Murray, be taking up much time, so others can expect to have plenty of time to speak. I just wanted to touch briefly on the social care system for children and mental health, and how poor mental health affects infants in contact with the children's social care system. As we've already heard, according to the Parent-Infant Foundation, a major predictor of the effect of an adverse child experience on a child's development is how strong and secure their relationship with their parents is. For looked after children or for children in kinship care, that relationship with their birth parent may be strained or non-existent. Abuse and neglect by caregivers will sometimes be the reason why they are not living with their birth parents in the first place. The Foundation notes that this relational trauma can be more damaging than other forms of early trauma. And the independent review of children's social care, the McAllister review that was published a couple of weeks ago, makes the same point. Safe, stable and nurturing relationships, as we've heard, serve as a buffer to adversity, build resilience and support children to develop skills to cope with future adversity in an adaptive and healthy manner. It's therefore vital that these children, who are most likely to have suffered early trauma, are able to access the therapeutic support that they need. And so I wanted to, at this point, mention a couple of things. One is around Nhs Cam Support for infants. I was struck by a Health Select Committee report that found, the phrase they used, it was highly concerning, the findings of the Parent-Infant Foundation survey of CAMS professionals, which found that only 26% of respondents had been, that 26% of respondents had not been trained to work with children aged 0 to 2, and only 36%, so only just over a third of respondents, agreed that there were mental health services in their area that could effectively work with children aged 0 to 2. So when the Minister responds, I'd be interested to hear that given the NHS long-term plan commits the government to achieving 100% access to specialist support for all children and young people aged 0 to 25 by 2029, how the Minister expects that goal to be achieved for the under-3s. But outside of the NHS, of course, there are some fantastic voluntary sector organisations that are doing amazing work. And I particularly wanted to call out an amazing charity in my own constituency. It's based in Twickenham itself, and it's called the Purple Elephant Project. And the reason the word elephant is in there is because of the family bonds within the community are very strong among elephants, apparently, and they more so than other animals, they display emotion when they're grieving or indeed when the herd is under threat. But it was the Purple Elephant charity was founded by a fantastic and inspirational woman called Jenny Haylock, who's a therapist herself, and at this very, very small site, and they've just been able to install a beautiful little sensory garden thanks to some funding they secured from Richmond Council recently. They offer play therapy, they offer art therapy, and different sort of categories of therapy, including filial therapy, which is where parents and caregivers are part of the therapy with children. And actually, the whole ethos is the parents and carers come in with the child, and even if the child's having separate therapy, there's a lovely space where parents can go and relax, recharge, or have somebody to talk to. So they're looking after the whole family, not just the child that suffered whatever trauma. And actually, Jenny herself is a specialist in adoption support. What I wanted to now touch on was actually the Adoption Support Fund. So I really welcome the fact that the government has extended the Adoption Support Fund until 2025. I've heard from several constituents of mine how vital this is. We all know, and the Minister is well aware, it's well documented, and we hear many examples in the Chamber on a regular basis of how difficult it is to access CAMS and therapy. And I know that Adoption Support Fund has been a lifeline for a number of parents in my constituency whose children have needed therapy and support and have used the ASF to be able to buy that in when they can't access it in a timely manner from the NHS. So although it's been extended to 2025, I would urge the government to put it on a permanent footing. However, what I wanted to touch on was that 150,000 children in kinship care, most of them in England and Wales, are not eligible for this funding. And the ASF does support children who were previously in care and are now subject to a special guardianship order or a child's arrangement order. But this eligibility criteria is clearly nonsensical, because we know that the majority of SGOs and CAOs are entered into by grandparents. And again, I've had examples of that in my own constituency, grandparents who are looking after their grandchildren because something has happened to their children and they're not in a position to take care of them anymore. And so that stops those children going into the care system. It obviously saves the taxpayer a lot of money, and we all know that the outcomes for children entering into kinship care rather than care with those they have no connection with do tend to be better on the whole. So, kinship carers are unsung heroes. They're saving taxpayer money, but they don't have the same rights to weekly allowances as foster carers, nor the entitlement to the ASF that adoptive parents do. There are almost twice as many children in kinship care as looked after children, and many of whom would be in the care system if it weren't for their kinship carers. But many of them will have suffered the same or worse experiences of early trauma. So I would urge the Minister to support Kinship's campaign to widen the eligibility criteria for the Adoption Support Fund. And I think it probably sits in the Department for Education, but as the Minister is here today responding on behalf of the government, at least she might take it away to her colleagues in DFE, even if she can't give me a commitment today, although I think the Chancellor might have something to say about that if she were to. But if they could consider widening the eligibility criteria for the ASF so that all children in kinship care can access the therapeutic support that they need. And I'd just like to finish by echoing the comments of the Right Honourable Lady for South Northamptonshire that, yes, Liberal Democrats believe that every child deserves the best start in life, as I think she said, every party does, regardless of their background. So, I think too often we see money spent on children's services and on the education system and therapeutic support for children and young people as a cost. To my mind, it's a huge investment. We should be looking at these things as a capital investment. Yes, we're not investing in buildings or roads. We're investing in tiny little people who could be our, the future entrepreneurs and the future teachers, the future doctors, the future politicians, the people who are going to, the return on investment for investing in children is huge. And that's something that I don't think actually the Treasury has fully appreciated. And I think actually if there is another campaign that we can all gather around is to make that case that actually investment in children and young people, you won't see that in the return on investment in 1 or 2 or perhaps even 3 election cycles. It's a long-term thing. And I hope that we can all come together to make that case so that we see that investment, because it will pay us huge dividends, and we all want our children to grow up happy, healthy and thrive and reach the very best of their potential. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Shannon.
Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to speak in this debate. The Right Honourable Lady for Northamptonshire deserves every credit. She and I came to this House, I think, in 2010, and there's been many occasions in Westminster Hall and in the Chamber that the Right Honourable Lady has spoken on this issue, and I think probably over those years, and the Honourable Lady will keep me right, I don't think there's been any time when she's asked for this debate that I haven't been here to support her. And I do that for a number of reasons. First of all, because of our friendship as MPs, but secondly, because the issue that the Right Honourable Lady brings forward is one that I fully support and endorse, and I'm always very, very challenged by her contributions, because it's so full of detail and knowledge of the right way to do it. And obviously, as a father and not as a mum, the input of mothers is so much greater than the input of the dad. And I can't take any credit for how my children turned out. It's really down to my wife. She's a lady that did all the hard work. I wasn't very, very rarely there. So I recognise that the role of the mother, in particular, is such a critical and important role, and it does, I think, mould the child for the future. So for that reason, I'm really, really pleased to come along.
Will you give way up?
Absolutely, yeah.
That actually we are seeing cultural change and we are seeing dads take a much more active role. And my husband's primary carer of our 2 children and is very much the dad at home and has been since they were tiny, and I've always been out there working.
Well, I thank the Honourable for that there, and I was just reminded of that when you mentioned that. I was at a function last Friday, say a centenary of the RUC, and one of the councillors of my party, he's a house dad, and he looks after the 2 children, and he tells me, Jim, he said that, hold on, I'm not going to mention his name, but he said to me last week, he says, Jim, I'd rather be working, you know, so I says, you are working, you're just looking after the children, it's slightly different, you know. But yes, you're right, I think the Honourable is right, and society is changing, and sometimes that's the way it is, and I have to say that I do think that the role of the mother is much more important, by the way. It's just me. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, Madam Chair. I just see a slightly different, really more critical role for the lady. A growing body of evidence from the clinical and social science field shows that the areas of the brain that control social and emotional development are most active during the first 3 years of a child's life. And the Honourable Lady referred to that, and she referred to actually a 3 to 5 year as well, and I think that's really important. Careful nurturing of a child's social and emotional health during their early years is vital to provide them with the skills necessary to form the relationships and interact with society later in life. So critical to get that right in those first few years. Honourable Lady has always said that over the debates in the Chamber and elsewhere. And the party's health spokesperson, so I'm very, very pleased to be here. Personal interest in this issue. Also as a grandfather with 5 grandchildren, 6th one on the way, so very shortly we'll have a 6th one to nurture and look after, and it means that the Shannon name will live on, and more so when the 6th grandchild arrives. Developments, however, start during pregnancy, and the choices and the experiences of the mother during this period can have a very significant impact on maternal and infant social and emotional health. With this in mind, Northern Ireland has a dedicated mental health strategy. I know the Minister is very aware of all these things, not just because some of our ancestry comes from that part of the world, but also because I know that the Honourable Lady makes it our job to be aware of what's happening in the regional administrations as well. And while we have a mental health strategy in place, the fact of the matter is the pressures of lockdown and COVID have greatly impacted child mental health, and any strategy must take this into consideration. And I want to just focus upon that one issue. The Right Honourable Lady referred to it in the COVID, because I think COVID has perhaps put the extra pressure on what the Right Honourable Lady is trying to achieve and what this debate tries to achieve. We have more children than ever who, as we say in Northern Ireland, to use a Northern Ireland comment, make strange with strangers. And I'll try to explain what that really means. I think the Right Honourable Lady referred to isolation during COVID, and I think it's as critical and as stark as that. COVID babies were literally prevented from seeing other children. That's a fact of life. I know that. That we being strange with strangers wasn't other than we just didn't know how to act with their wee children of their age. They didn't know how to react to adults who particularly wanted to be friendly and acknowledge them. So that being strange with strangers that we referred to was so critical. And when they didn't see other children and the adults for formative periods of their lives, we need to address this. So my major ask will be, Minister, if I can ask you this, and I'm very happy if you're able to respond, ever mindful that health and education, etc., is devolved matters. But the issue will be similar for Northern Ireland as it is for here. What extra assistance or help or funding or advice can be given to parents who had their children born in COVID, who were maybe that age of 2 to 5 whenever COVID came over, those 2 stark years where life was so different, where you weren't able to interact, and what can be done to address that issue for those, as we come out of COVID and move forward in a constructive way. Namely, for my office, she's my speech writer, by the way. Keep her busy and make sure that she's over all these things. But her and I are of a kindred mind and spirit, and it's easy for her and I to discuss the issues we want to speak on, because we sort of look at the same way of how to do things. Now, she helps with the creche and the children's church on a Sunday morning, and she has said it is only after a full year, this is a personal experience, only after a full year of being back that some mothers can slip back into the service and the children aren't upset. To explain what that means, Madam Chair, because of the last 2 years and that COVID and pandemic, it put pressures on families like never before. It meant that they probably didn't leave their mum very, very often. And then now, whenever the creche is back and the children's church is back, then the children are able to stay there and their mums are able to leave. So there's that wee period of an example of how, and that's her opinion. So it's taken a year for them to be safe in a safe place. Wow, if their mother isn't there. So my fear, Madam Chair, is for those mothers who haven't yet been able to leave their children, and that's those who don't attend church, those who don't have a creche, who don't have a nursery, who don't have the access to other adults who can help. Right on the lady referred to that, how important it was for the mum to have another mum to talk with and discuss things. Even that was lost partially in the pandemic as well. I'm wondering how preschool and nursery are going to go as well. We must consider the effect of lockdown in a very detailed way. And it's a big question to ask the Minister, and genuinely is, but I see it real in my constituency, and I'm sure that everyone else who will speak afterwards and those who spoke before are of the same page. I recently read a report by the National Children's Bureau which highlighted the post-COVID position. While support for babies, for infants and their families has always been critically important, the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic has refocused efforts on prevention and early intervention to address new or increasing risks, which is what this debate is really about. While it will be some time before the long-term impact of the pandemic is known, evidence already suggests a number of areas for concern, including the rising cost of living. There's other things today. Pandemic has moved on, but there's other things today that impact upon the children of the babies right through to the 3-year-old to the 5-year-old, and that's the cost of living. It's increasing fuel poverty. These are real things that every mother and every dad has to look at every day. And I'm no different from anybody else in this chamber. I think we're all the same. We're getting it regularly from our people and our constituents, and we worry about that. And again, it's not the Minister's responsibility, but it's just to show how the impact of these things are happening. It's an increased reliance on food banks for many people, for many families, on top of already unacceptable child poverty rates, set against the evidence on the links between poverty and adverse childhood experiences. We read some stories in the press. I never feel to be quite upset, Madam Chair, when you read those stories about wee children that have been abused or in the cases that make the press, unfortunately, have been killed. I just can't understand how those things can happen. I can't understand the mindset of anybody that does that, and I can't understand how social services missed out in stepping in early. That's just me from the outside. I find them quite painful to read, Madam Chair. I think we're all the same. And then sometimes you just have to flick over the page. Not that you're disregarding it, because it's so awful you just can't read it all. So those are some of the things of the day. Concern for parental mental ill health is driven by isolation, by job uncertainty or losses of jobs, loss of loved ones as well, illness and anxiety amongst other factors. I just want to make a couple of quick points, and I'm going to come to the end, for I realise that time's flying on here. I'm also greatly encouraged by foster families. The Honourable Lady referred to it, and she's absolutely right. I know some foster families who do some fantastic work, and they have a love for their children, and it's not their biological children, it's the children they have. They give them children who don't have any, have the love that they didn't have in the home, for whatever the reasons may be. And I think those foster families, and I know some who have adopted children, maybe 20 or 30 children over a period. That's incredible what they do, but they give that affection, that love that's necessary, and try to address. And if you get a wee baby or a wee small child in that 3 to 5 years, so important years as well. Increased pressures within the home and the rising incidence of domestic violence, another issue, happens unfortunately with irregularity. putting young children at risk of witnessing or experiencing abuse and impacting parental well-being. They see their mummy, their daddy more often, let's be honest, the mum getting beaten, and how that affects the child. Right on the lady's right. Those experiences of that 3 to 5 year old, when you're able to see things, will have that impact on years to come. So it's really important. That's why this debate is so critical. And that's why over the years, when the Right Honourable Lady brought this to Westminster Hall and to the Chamber, I was always there, because I think, not as good as the Right Honourable Lady does, but I do understand very, very well what the Right Honourable Lady is trying to achieve. And pressures facing services as they seek to continue delivery of essential support to infants, to parents and their families within the constantly changing environment they find themselves in, and the environment is changing all the time. The pressures are great. Delays in access to services and support during lockdown and the pandemic, particularly for isolated and vulnerable families with newborns. Sometimes there's posts, the ladies have, mothers have difficulty dealing with their children sometimes. It happens. It's a fact of life. But to have that someone to speak to, someone to help, someone to assist at that early time is so very important. The investing in children and young people, Honourable Lady is absolutely right. I see it as an investment. I see it as an opportunity to get it right for a child for the future. And whether they'll be ministers or chairs of committees or doctors or teachers or whatever they will be, or MPs, as to give them that opportunity to do it. So let's get the thing right at the early stage. Every child deserves a good start, as the Right Honourable Lady Fair. I agree wholeheartedly with that, and I hope that this debate in some way can move us towards that. The end is clear, and we need to be just as clear in our pathway to support and help, and how this will be funded and promoted in every area of this United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I'm very pleased to be the MP here. I'm very pleased to be part of a nation that is united from the 4 regions, and I say that to my honourable friend in the front row here, who she and I are very good friends. But I think it's important that we have a strategy and a way forward within all 4 regions that can achieve what the Right Honourable Lady says, to give every child a good start in life. But if we could do that, we'd be doing well.
Thank you. Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and obviously I want to congratulate the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire, not just on securing this debate, but for our ongoing passionate advocacy for our youngest citizens, and it's a mission I'm always very happy to support her in. And one of the things that really awakened my interest in this whole area was during the COVID lockdown, and both the Right Honourable Lady and the Member for Strangford have spoken quite movingly, I think, about the impact that lockdown has had on many families. But I know I was speaking to mums in my constituency who are having their first child in lockdown, with all of those pressures on them, not having contact with their partners in labour or their families, or informal and formal networks afterwards, and reflecting on how different their experience was to my own when I had my babies over a decade ago now, and the real impact that had. And my first impression was the impact that very much had on maternal mental health, and I was very pleased to be able to secure a debate on that topic in March 2021. But of course, the issue of infant mental health is so very closely linked to that, and I'm really grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for the really detailed opening speech she gave, because I think it's so important. We've obviously got the data and we've got the evidence, and it very much underpins what we all see, I think, as anecdotal evidence from our own experiences, both personal experience and in our constituencies. And I think also a number of really great points being made about how the baby's mental health is based so largely on the quality of the parent-infant relationship, and how the parents' responses shape how babies experience emotions, and how they can regulate their own emotions and express themselves. And we've obviously referred a great deal to the research, but what we've seen is that 15% of children, and that's more than 4 children in an average classroom, will have developed a problematic relationship with their main caregiver as a result of unpredictable or hostile care. And as we've already debated, this troubled start increases the risk of children having poorer social and emotional well-being across their lives, and the ongoing and lasting impact
that can have. But my constituency neighbour and friend, the member for Twickenham, talked already about some of the gaps in services available to support infant mental health. And I think that is something that we really do need to focus on. There's currently 42 specialised parent-infant relationship teams in the UK, which really focus on strengthening and rebuilding those early relationships. But that actually means that most babies live in an area without access to such a team. And they're multidisciplinary teams led by mental health professionals with expertise working with babies and families. And a key area of focus is working with families who've experienced intergenerational trauma. And with the right care, that trauma experienced by parents doesn't have to inform their infant's development. But it's so important that specialised services are there to detect such instances and are equipped with the skills and funding to intervene and support families where needed. And I just wanted to touch very briefly on the experience of dads here that's been raised on a couple of occasions. And I recently visited my local maternal mental health crisis unit, and I was really surprised to find that there is no systematic care given to dads who are experiencing mental health problems when their partners are pregnant. They might get picked up if their partner is coming for care, but otherwise it very much flies under the radar. And I think in particular we know that domestic violence can often commence during pregnancy, and I do see that as a direct result perhaps of men's struggles with mental health as they become fathers. So I do think it's a matter of real urgency that we pick up the matter of dad's mental health, and particularly from the beginning of pregnancy. And I think it's also really important that mental health professionals can spot the signs of poor mental health in our youngest children who can't express their emotions in the same way that older children are able to. And like the member for Strangford, some of these reviews into some of these really horrific cases of child death that have been carried out recently, and thinking of Star Hobson and Arthur Labrinjo Hughes, I don't want to talk too much about them for the same reasons as the member for Strangford. I just can't. It's just too much. But I really hope, if I can't, that someone is looking at that and thinking about what could have been done to really detect those signs of mental distress in those young people who can't express it for themselves, and that we are training people and perhaps some of these more crisis situations to really pick up on what's going on with the mental health of young people who have difficult, damaged, problematic relationships with their caregivers, don't know how to express themselves, but are at risk of real harm if their mental distress is not picked up. Whenever I get the opportunity, I like to highlight the importance of health visiting, and this is something I really picked up when I was talking to the first-time mums in lockdown. And you know, full disclosure, my own mother is a health visitor, so I have been raised to regard health visiting as a wonderful thing. But that's been my actual experience as well. But the importance of health visitors is that they are visiting, or should be visiting, every new mother and her family in her home. And for those mothers who are finding it hard to reach out, it's an invaluable service to have somebody coming to them and asking them if they're okay. And it's really something we have got to continue to support. But of course, on this particular issue of infant mental health, health visitors are uniquely placed to identify those concerns, to spot issues in early relationship and attachment forming, and to identify where infant mental health may be an issue. Now, families should receive a minimum of 5 mandated reviews by a health visitor between pregnancy and age 2.5. But even before the pandemic, many children were not receiving these core contacts. And over the course of the pandemic, the number of missed contacts has increased further, despite the fact that many reviews were conducted online or over the phone. And one thing I am really, really concerned about is that we shouldn't allow telephone or Zoom visits to become a new normal, because you will miss out so much from not visiting mothers in their home. Evidence of domestic violence and particularly this subject we're discussing today, these attachment disorders, will not be so evident if health visiting visits move to some sort of digital contact. In 2015, responsibility for health visiting was transferred to local authorities, and since then it's estimated that 30% of the health visiting workforce has been lost, with further losses expected. And like many local services, there is something of a postcode lottery in the availability and quality of support.
And my team, we've spoken to health visitors in North Kingston, which is the team that supported me when my children were babies. And they reiterated that their biggest challenge currently is workforce issues. Almost 25% of their current health visiting team are due to retire in the next few years, and they're really struggling to find candidates for the vacant roles. They have recently advertised a vacancy which just received just the one application, and then that person decided that they wouldn't take the post. The health visitors work in relatively small teams with large caseloads, and in North Kingston, we're looking at about 600 cases for every health visitor, which is really unsustainable, and not least because it forces health visitors to focus their resources on the most at-risk families. But I think we all know that all these problems can occur in all kinds of families, from all backgrounds, income groups, and it's really, really important that we push for health visiting to remain a universal service with home visits. I just wanted to end just by stressing the importance of that face-to-face contact, that the health visiting service, it needs support, it really needs investment in its workforce. And more than anything, what we want to be able to do is to join up, so that the Department for Health and Social Care are working closely together with local authorities to make sure that the right information is being passed between agencies. If health visitors are picking up anything that's concerning, that they can immediately speak to the other agencies surrounding that family, and so that we don't, any of us, have to read too many more distressing case reports after the ones that I've previously mentioned. The Start for Life programme recently announced 300 million. It's wonderful, it'll be great, but there's no funding in there for health visiting services. And the funding sits within the DHSC, but that, of course, is separate to health visiting. So again, if we can join that up, that would make a huge difference, because the fragmentation, there's a risk that things will fall through the gaps. And I think the one thing that we have all said very clearly here today is that the consequences of allowing that to happen are too big for our individual children, but for our society as a whole. All those future MPs that we are looking forward to welcoming to this place. But in every corner of the United Kingdom, in every part of the country, there are little babies and children right now who are, we really, really want to do everything we can to give them the best possible start, and that includes supporting their mental health from the earliest days. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Scottish Nationalist spokesperson, Dr. Lisa Cameron.
Thank you very much, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, such an esteemed lady and parliamentarian in the House who is friendly to all. And I'd like to particularly congratulate and thank the Right Honourable Lady for bringing forward what I think is just such a vital debate. Having worked all my life prior to coming to this House as a psychologist, I just think it is fantastic that there are champions for this issue here, because setting the right foundation right across the United Kingdom and giving people opportunities to thrive from the earliest days of their lives is just an absolutely fundamental premise to creating a healthy society moving forward. So she should never underestimate the value of the work that she is taking forward in this House, not just today, but the impact it will have for generations to come. And I wish her all the best for her early years review, and any support that I can offer, very gratefully give. We also heard from the Honourable Member for Twickenham, who spoke about the social care system for children and the particular plight of children in care. And I think that goes back to disorganised attachment styles that were mentioned. In fact, this whole debate has taken me right back to my psychology days when I was training a long time ago, and Bowlby's theory of attachment, which is the foundation for much of what we're speaking about today, and how it's so important that if a parent is not there, that there is a trusted and secure caregiver. And it doesn't have to be the mother. Often, as the Honourable Member for Strangford said, it is a mother. It can be a father, it can be another trusted adult or individual, but the importance is that there is a secure attachment there. And I think she was absolutely spot on in speaking about why having disruption in early childhood, particularly for those children in care who go into care settings, can have an adverse impact, and why we must make sure that there is trusted, secure and stable relationships built, and that those are provided throughout every child's life, and that we support that. So I think she's really raised a vital issue. She also spoke very eloquently about CAM support for infants and why that's just so crucial. And actually, one of the former MPs, Helen Clark, who used to serve in this House and who leads up on the Children's Charter, is with the Play Therapists UK group doing vital work on this now through the Children's Charter. And there are many therapies that should be open and available to families with infants, family therapy itself, behaviour therapy. I used to do that when I was practising many moons ago with very young children, and play therapy. And actually during COVID, I will never forget the feeling when I looked out of the window and the council were opening up the play park across the road from my house, and the children, including my own, ran to the play park because there is something very therapeutic and nurturing about peer support as well, and being able to play and being able to be in a positive environment. And I also experienced that exact sentiment when I visited Lebanon to the refugee centres there. And one of the most fundamental changes for those young children was the building of a play park in the refugee centre, and they were able to smile and laugh and play. And so therapeutic involvement is just so very vital, but also having natural environments that enhance well-being is vital too. So I thank her for her contribution. And the Honourable Member for Strangford, who is in his place and is an absolute stalwart of this issue and so many others in the House, and he spoke also about the impact of COVID-19 on children's development. And I think there's going to have to be a lot of research done into this, because we might not actually see the full impact for years to come, and longitudinal studies will be needed to address that. But what we must do is all garner together to ensure that funding and support and programmes are put in place so that children can have every opportunity to catch up with the socialisation and the education that they have missed during this very critical period. We also heard from the Honourable Lady from Richmond Park, who spoke, and I think it was very, very important, about gaps in service and also maternal mental health, and also gave a shout out for dad's mental health, which actually is very rarely mentioned, I think, but so crucial. And I know when I first came to this House as well, my husband took on many more of the activities that I had usually done. The first week I came back from Parliament, I opened the fridge door and there were a whole host of Tupperware dishes in the fridge. And I said, what's this and where did it come from? And the neighbours had very kindly handed him in food for himself and my children, our children, because they assumed that they would be very reliant on me and not on him. So he stepped up to the mark, and I think he didn't need those, but I think it still shows that, you know, we can't value fathers enough and the work that they do, and they really, you know, are all-round heroes too, as well, in terms of early childhood development. She also mentioned health visiting, which I think is extremely important, and that face-to-face contact. And I know, as chair of the all-party health group, that face-to-face contact is just so vital for people, because particularly when they're speaking about mental health and well-being, they find it very difficult to do that on a Zoom, and often don't bring it up at all in that type of format or over the phone. It's when they have a personal relationship that's built up over time that's important. And I think the same can be said for GPs as well. It's very, very, very vital that people can get back to seeing their GPs face to face. And we're going to be taking forward an inquiry into those issues. I wanted to just quickly mention adverse childhood experiences. I worked in and out of prisons with young people, young offenders institutes and prisons for adults throughout a number of years in my career, and visiting people because of mental health issues and doing mental health assessments, and there were very, very few people that I assessed who ended up in the criminal justice system who didn't speak of some trauma in childhood. And I think the more we can do at the earliest stage, the better, to give people a path that will lead them to a fulfilling life. It's not always that early difficulties can lead to criminal justice problems, but there is a very significant correlation in that, if not causation, and the factors we know are risk factors, and we must do all that we can. The British Psychological Society has also highlighted that preschool children of parents with poor mental health are 3 times more likely to have mental health difficulties themselves. So there is an intergenerational aspect that we have to help with well-being more generally, and across the lifespan for families too. I think from my own experience from working as an MP and coming from psychology to being an MP, I'm seeing now as well that we're not picking up young people who have autistic spectrum disorder, learning difficulties perhaps early enough, and those assessments can be done preschool. They can't, you know, and often the people who come to see me at my surgery as an MP say to me, I have been saying for years and years and years that I need an assessment, and yet the waiting lists preclude that at the right time. 2 years is a long, long time in terms of childhood development, in terms of the developmental milestones that children will reach, and may actually not reach at the correct time because they don't have additional supports to help them catch up. So we do need to get early diagnosis in there through the Children's and Families Hubs or through community health services very, very early. And I think this is an issue right across the UK, and I can say that as chair of the health group because I hear from people right across the UK on that matter. Parents are asking for help. They need to have that help. Parenting programmes are vital. I spoke to a nutritionist yesterday who was telling me that things that I think our school system has become so very dynamic that some of the things that we did when I was at school have perhaps been lost. So he was telling me that he is having to do a lot of work with parents in terms of nutrition for infants, and he said some parents really have never undertaken any kind of cooking or home economics at school, it would have been called when I was there, and we're blitzing McDonald's and feeding them to young infants, and you know, so just things that are quite fundamental in terms of parenting supports we need to make sure that we put in place. So access to paediatric care, including psychology, other types of therapy, play therapy, parity of mental health and physical health, and looking at a well-being recovery from our COVID pandemic, I think will be so very key. And those parenting programmes for those parents who feel they need that bit of extra support is going to be extremely vital. It would be lax of me not to mention some of the work the Scottish Government is doing very quickly. We, of course, have the baby box, which has been delivered to more than 200,000 families since 2017, and it ensures that we welcome in Scotland every child, and they have a basic provision for the first few months of their lives. And we're saying very positively, you're welcome. We want to do our best for you throughout your life. And the Scottish Government also recognised the significant impact of COVID-19 pandemic and is doing work to address the issues that I have raised. The Best Start 5-year plan for neonatal care and perinatal and infant mental health programme boards have been set up, and a number of increased payments and grants have also been made. But I concur with what I've heard today. I want to work wholeheartedly with everybody who's working in this very vital area, and it has been nice to be taken back such a long time, many decades, to my education as a psychology graduate, to Bowlby's very important theory of attachment, and why it is that we should be ensuring that Infant Mental Health Week is taken forward every week of the year, but especially that we hold it as a key issue in the work that we do here in the Parliament. Thank you.
Minister Rosina Allen-Cahn.
Thank you, Mrs Murray. It's a pleasure to wind up the opposition with you in the chair. I would like to start by thanking the Right Honourable Member for South Northamptonshire for securing this extremely important debate for Infant Mental Health Awareness Week, and to all Honourable Members for their thoughtful contributions this afternoon. I know I say this sometimes in Westminster Hall debates, but there really are some debates that unite us all. And I think when we think about the issue of mental health and infant mental health, this is one of those issues. And so I'm delighted to say that I have learned a lot and feel the very powerful advocacy that has come out of every single wonderful contribution today. And it's good to know that there are such powerful advocates in this room. And I thank the Honourable Member who secured this debate for all of the work that she's been doing in this space. We're all here today because we recognise that adverse childhood experiences are the key driver of mental illness in later life. And we have many experts in the room today, it seems. The last 2 years have shone a light on the problem. The pandemic has hit the poorest and most vulnerable children the hardest, highlighting the inequalities in our society, inequalities that it's very hard to escape. Children with chaotic home lives, children in overcrowded, noisy housing, children from black and ethnic minority communities who suffer disproportionately from worse outcomes and worse mental health provision than white communities. In 2018, it was estimated that 50,000 children aged 0 to 5 lived in homes where domestic violence, adult drug or alcohol dependency and adult mental illness were all present. Children and adults living in households in the lowest 20% income bracket are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop mental health problems than those in the highest. There was already a crisis in child and adolescent mental health provision in this country, even before the pandemic, and the virus has undoubtedly made it worse. The latest report by the Children's Commissioner showed that demand for child and adolescent mental health services increased, with 1 in 6 children suffering from a probable mental health condition, up from 1 in 9 in just 2017. That's 1 in 6. Yet only a third of children were able to actually access treatment. And 42% of child and adolescent mental health services in England do not accept referrals for children aged 2 and under. Why should someone's ability to access preventative services or treatment be determined by where they live? Poor mental health in childhood is carried into adulthood. What happens today, as we've heard already today so many times, will impact on demands for mental health services tomorrow. As the old saying goes, prevention is indeed better than cure. That's why we have a range of public health measures in place for children. Check-ups for eyesight, hearing and growth. Vaccinations to protect against measles, mumps and rubella. And yet, we ignore the wisdom of the ages when it comes to children's mental health. Improving infant mental health is all about prevention. With early intervention, those critical 1,001 days, families and infants can be supported. As a doctor, I know that adverse childhood experiences are a key contributing factor to poor mental health in adulthood. In A&E, I see children coming in increasingly younger, having self-harmed or living with eating disorders. It's simply heartbreaking, and for parents, it's absolutely agonising. It should be a badge of shame for the government that 3/4 of children were not seen within 4 weeks of being referred to children's mental health services. Imagine being a mum or dad whose child is self-harming or presenting with symptoms of depression, anxiety or phobias, and being without specialist support for over a month. There has been a 77% rise in the number of children needing specialist treatment for a severe mental health crisis between April 2021 and October 2021 compared to the same period in 2019. According to the latest Children's Commissioner report, waiting times do depend on where you live. And when eventually you are seen, services may be hundreds of miles away. When the Minister responds, can I invite them to please tell the House what new measures the government is taking in relation to infants and their parents specifically? And I'm looking for new measures. What new money is being allocated to child and adolescent mental health services, and where is it going? And how many new mental health staff will be recruited? Are there plans for specialised parent-infant relationship teams for those infants most at risk? And how will they tackle mental health inequalities on the lines of place, race, class and income? And with respect, in every mental health debate we hear about the £2.3 billion allocated for mental health, but it seems to get spent 5 to 10 times over. I would really like some specific answers to my specific questions today. The next Labour government is committed to improving infant and child mental health. We will guarantee mental health treatment within a month for all who need it, ensuring that patients start receiving appropriate treatment, not simply an initial assessment of needs, within a month of referral. We will recruit 8,500 new staff so that 1 million additional people can access treatment every year by the end of Labour's first term in office. And we shall provide specialist mental health support in every school and put an open access mental health hub for children and young people in every single community, ensuring that every child has somewhere safe and secure to talk about their mental health. As it stands, our children are being failed. They're being failed on prevention, failed on access to treatment, failed on funding, and failed on supporting their families. This system is stretched to breaking point. The staff are exhausted, the children are suffering, and parents don't know where to turn. I plead with the Minister today to take action before it's too late for another generation of children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and it is indeed a pleasure to serve for the first time under your chairmanship. I would also like to thank my right honourable friend and congratulate her for securing this debate. I soaked up her speech, actually. She used that phrase, soaked up, and that's when she said it. It felt like what I was doing at the time. It was insightful, educational, and I think all of us got the benefit of 25 years' worth of experience and developing understanding of not only what we need to do, but also how we should be doing it as well. And as we know in this place, quite often we can admire the problems, but it's much harder to come up with the solutions. And I know her work has been absolutely vital in doing that and helping government as well shape policy in this area. And thank you indeed to all honourable members for their contributions and importantly for support for this initiative, because we're at the very beginning of this journey, and I think keeping that collegiate approach and making sure that we shape this, we have a real opportunity to shape this, and it's not, as many of the areas that I'm responsible for, actually it's not particularly party political. They're actually really about how we impact real people's lives, and in particular in this case the babies, which, you know, it's clear to all of us that the development of babies is quite incredible, and it needs a lot of support, and that vital support in those first years. Babies are born with more brain cells than stars in the Milky Way galaxy. If a baby is loved and receives care, the baby's brain flourishes, laying the foundations for good future physical and mental health. And that's why the first 1,001 days have been described as critical for development. And I think that is a real understanding now that is indisputed. It's also why I'm delighted to be speaking about this important topic and also working on developing these new services, and it's particularly welcome to be able to do so during Infant Mental Health Awareness Week. So infant mental health refers to social, emotional and cognitive development. For good infant mental health, babies need parents or carers who will consistently meet their needs, as outlined by my right honourable friend. This leads to secure attachment relationships, and over 60 years of research tells us that this is related to positive long-term developmental outcomes, from improved emotional development, school readiness, to reduced rates of offending, right at the other end, as mentioned by the honourable member, the shadow from the SNP. Having a baby can be a great time of joy, but it's also a lot of challenge and change as well, and many new parents get the support they need from midwifery and health visiting teams, as was mentioned by the honourable member for Richmond Park, and thank you to her mother for all of her service in this as well. I'm sure she's helped a lot of parents and a lot of families in her time, as well as families and friends. And that's the other thing we talked about, COVID, when a lot of that couldn't happen. And clearly it was a very difficult time for many new parents. But we also know that having a baby can be a time of great challenge. With or without a pandemic, it's a time of great change. There are many reasons why a new parent may struggle, from social isolation, which has been mentioned, financial stress, a traumatic birth, relationship difficulties, or their own experiences of early trauma, indeed. And without the right support, this can impact parent and baby alike. Perimental perinatal mental health difficulties are actually common. Approximately 1 in 5 mothers and 1 in 10 fathers experience mental health difficulties during this 1001 critical days. It's critical days, but it's also very difficult days, which is why the numbers are so high. And parental mental health difficulties are associated with increased rates of mental health difficulties in children, as has been mentioned by a number of people. This can pass on. Parent-infant relationship difficulties are also common. That's the baby can. This can involve a parent struggling to bond with their baby, or it may or may not relate to a perinatal mental health difficulty. Although exact prevalence is difficult to establish, some estimates indicate that approximately 40% of babies have what we call insecure attachment, and 10% have, as has been mentioned, a disorganised attachment style. And both are associated with an array of long-term developmental outcomes. I recently visited the Knowsley Building Attachment and Bonds Service, which was one of the new services that's been trialled and introduced. It was actually on the same estate where I went to school, so I literally passed my school, so it was very familiar, and I was very familiar with the problems that they were trying to deal with. And I saw firsthand that relationships are everything, and that early intervention is crucial. And I met a mum there with her baby. Actually, she'd had several children where she'd had problems and she was no longer with the children. And this baby, they'd put a lot of effort to keep mum and baby together, and dad, and to make sure that they built that family. And it was making a massive difference. And in fact, her other children had since come back to join her as well. And it was just changing everything about the outcome for not only the baby, but for the other children in the family as well. So these issues are why ensuring that every baby gets the best start in life. It's of central importance to this government. Investing in the youngest and most vulnerable members of our society, as everybody said, it is an investment, and it's part of our ambition to level up health outcomes and opportunities across the country. Our vision is for every parent and carer to have access to high-quality universal services in their local area. This is set out in the Best Start for Life, a vision for the 1001 critical days, published by the Early Years Healthy Development Review in March 2021. And I'd also like to thank my right honourable friend for this inspirational work, enabling us to support the implementation of this vision. The government is investing £302 million to improve Start for Life services and create a network of family hubs in 75 local authorities in England. And the funding will help bring together services for families into one place, improving their access to support, advice and services. And this funding package includes £100 million for perinatal mental health and parent-infant relationship support, £50 million for breastfeeding support, and £50 million for parenting support. And this significant £100 million investment will improve access to mental health support for babies from conception up to the age of 2 years old, as was requested by the Honourable Member for Twickenham. That will help us build the workforce to fill that gap that we see at the moment. And the funding will tackle entrenched inequalities in communities, as mentioned by the Shadow Minister, and we announced the 75 local authority areas that are eligible for a share of this funding in April. And the funding will be targeted at local authorities with disproportionate poor health and educational outcomes. I'm pretty sure Knowsley, where I'm from, will be included in there as well, or was included in there as well. And indeed, the Honourable Lady, I think, once stood in Knowsley as well. Since the announcement, we've been working with the eligible local authorities and a range of expert stakeholders to further develop the programme. We'll share a draft programme guide detailing how local authorities can make the most of this funding in the coming weeks. This investment will complement the ambitions set out in the NHS long-term plan, as referred to by the Honourable Lady, and this will be to deliver the fastest expansion in mental health services in the NHS's history, with 345,000 more children and young people having access to specialist NHS-funded mental health care. And this ambition is backed by the additional £2.3 billion a year for mental health. But we haven't actually spent a penny of it yet, because this is by 2023-24, so that's when that amount kicks in, and then it will be for years thereafter. In terms of the workforce, obviously this is vital. And it is clear that we have to invest in developing the modern, diverse, highly skilled workforce that we will need to support babies and families by trialling and evaluating innovative workforce models in 5 local authorities. So that's what we'll be doing to make sure we've got the mix and blend, because obviously health visitors as well are a key part of that, as mentioned by the Honourable Lady for Richmond Park. And in terms of the 2029, obviously we know that the training of more clinical psychologists, child and adolescent psychotherapists, psychiatrists and perinatal workforce will require additional capacity across the current education and service providers, all of which are currently either operating at full capacity or limited. So we obviously have immediate action at the moment to model the workforce to support the development of new roles, new ways of working and upskilling, and particularly with regard to perinatal and primary and community workforce, including health visitors. And we will make sure that we will work with, we're working with Health Education England and the NHS E&I to make sure that we have this workforce plan to sit alongside the new 10-year mental health plan. So when we publish that, we'll be putting that together. So we do absolutely recognise that this is critical. And the training time, as the Honourable Lady will be able to vouch for, is a long time. So we have to innovate. We have to do things differently, because otherwise it will take too long and there'll be too many people who will not benefit from what we all know is required. We've heard from families that stigma is a real barrier to them seeking support as well. I actually really do identify with that. Definitely I saw that growing up in Knowsley, and my friend used to run the Shore Start Centre there, and it was clear that she found it very difficult to access the people that she knew she needed to access because stigma did get in the way. So to reduce the stigma associated with perinatal mental health difficulties and those parent-infant relationships, we must have a multifaceted approach, which includes ensuring the Family Hub is a welcoming place for all families, sharing key messages about perinatal mental well-being and good parent-infant relationships, and enabling the workforce, paid and voluntary, to feel comfortable and confident to have conversations with families about mental health, about bonding, about attachment. These are difficult conversations to have. Needless to say, there is little point in tackling stigma if there is not enough support available. So there is currently a huge variation, as has been mentioned, in the availability of early intervention and preventative support across the country. Some areas have robust and very good offers, including universal antenatal education, classes, peer support services for breastfeeding and mental health, and drop-in sessions for the local family hub. In other places, support may only be available if difficulties become particularly severe. And that also feeds into the stigma, because it's only when something is going wrong that you get access to the services, which is why the universal nature of the services is absolutely quite vital. There's also a discrepancy in perinatal mental health support that's available for mothers and support available for fathers and co-parents, as has been mentioned by the Honourable Member for Twickenham and Richmond Park. We know that more than 1 in 3 new fathers are concerned about their mental health in the perinatal period. We identified this gap in provision of support for fathers or co-parents experiencing perinatal mental health difficulties, particularly if the mother is not experiencing any difficulties. They won't get picked up in the same way. So this inequality of access has an impact on the baby's mental health and well-being, and a positive relationship with both carers would lead to better long-term developmental outcomes. So that's recognised, it's identified as a gap. So provision of support will be provided. And lastly, none of this will be achieved and achievable without a knowledgeable, skilled and confident workforce. This investment is an opportunity to improve workforce capability and workforce capacity. We understand the workforce challenges and will encourage local areas to create capacity by incorporating greater skill mix into clinically led teams, relieving the pressure on existing teams. The funding available through the Start for Life programme will enhance capacity across a range of professions and volunteers and improve capability through training. This will build the knowledge and confidence of the workforce needed to provide that mental health support. The Family Hub model will enable families to receive support with perinatal mental health and parent-infant relationship difficulties. And this investment will build on existing provision whilst responding also to local needs. But before I draw this speech to a close, I'd like to acknowledge the important contribution of 2 other government initiatives. Firstly, an additional £200 million investment in the Supporting Families programme. And this will enable local authorities and their partners to provide help earlier and promote better outcomes for an additional 300,000 families, including families with babies. And secondly, we've launched a consultation to develop, as I mentioned, a new 10-year 10-year plan for mental health. The consultation is still open until the 7th of July. We are actually concerned to try and get more people responding to that, particularly from black and ethnic minority areas and people, and also from men. So we'd like more people to respond. So if you could help in your spreading of the message to make sure that we get representations from many, many more people in those areas or with those characteristics. Secondly, so this mental health plan, it includes specific questions relating to babies and their parents or carers in recognition of the distinct and critical needs in the first 1001 critical days. And we look forward to seeing the results of this consultation. As I say, please spread the word. I would like to assure, end by assuring my right honourable friend, the member for South Nottinghamshire, that early intervention and prevention sits at the top of this government's mental health priorities. We are committed to ensuring that babies and their families get the support they need and to ensure that they get the very best start in life. Thank you.
Andrea Leadsom to wind up.
Thank you very much, Mrs Murray. What a fantastic debate. We need to keep doing this. It's wonderful. Every time we get together, we have the most positive and constructive discussion about what is, in my view, the most significant contribution we can make to building a happier and healthier and, frankly, a more successful society. And I'd like to pay tribute to the Honourable Lady who recently held a Home Start celebration, and to remind her that one of the people who was there sort of trying to get money off us all was telling this wonderful story about how sadly he'd lost his mum when he was quite young. And he said to her, he was on her deathbed, and he was sort of thanking her for being such a wonderful mother. And she said to him, "I'm not a wonderful mother, I was just well parented and I passed it on." And I thought, doesn't that sum it up, really? And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that every family gets well parented so that they can parent well. And actually, just as a sort of postscript, it's really weird because obviously I chair this review, so all of the stuff that the Minister is talking about is very, very well known to me, but it's so lovely to hear her saying it because it's just like, it's actually happening then. It's not just a figment of my imagination. So thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you, colleagues, for a wonderful debate.
The question is that this House has considered Infant Mental Health Week 2022. As many as are of that opinion,